Hey, good morning. So let me share my screen. Do you have any questions so far in the stringing methods or list, set, tuple, and the dictionary? Do you have any questions? Praveen, do you have any questions?
Yeah, no, sir. That's no.
Okay. So our next level discussion is about exception handling. Okay. Let's start with that. Okay, before start with exception handling, just I want to discuss about some terminologies. Okay. One is like you can say a normal termination, normal termination. Another one is like abnormal termination. One is like normal termination, another one is like abnormal termination. The next one is like okay, syntax error, syntax error. The next one is like runtime error. Okay. Terminology wise, just I want to discuss about what is normal termination, what is abnormal termination. The next one is like what is syntax error. Okay, terminology wise, what is runtime error? Okay, let's go. What is normal termination? It's very simple. Print. Okay, one. The next one is like print. Two. The next one is like print. Okay, some value. Okay, 10 by 0 or something. The next one is like otherwise. Okay, simple thing is like print name or location. After that, print to 3. If I run these statements only, these four statements only, what is my output? If I run these four statements only, what is my output? If I run these four statements only, what is my output? Okay, now onwards, I want to use, okay, not Jupyter Notebook, just I want to use like VS Code. Now onwards, I want to use like VS Code editor. Okay, let me open our VS Code editor. Let me go to our workspace folder also. Let me go to our workspace folder. It is not opened recently, right? Open folder. Go to Python. Okay, go to 88. Let me open this. Okay. Here, I want to create one folder. I want to create one folder, or I can say exception handling. Exception handling. Okay, done. Done. In this, let me create okay one dot keyword. Okay, in the serial order you can come to know. These are the four statements. These are the four statements I want to execute. I want to execute. If I execute these four statements, what is my output? That is the question. If I execute these four statements, what is my output? We can run this program, you know that. Okay, go to cd exception handling and here py one dot py. If I run this one, see one printed expected only, two printed expected only. Looking for what? Name is a value or a reference. Name is a value or a reference. It is not a value. It is a reference, right? It is a reference. This reference already defined or not defined? This reference already defined or not defined? This reference already defined or not defined? Come on, it is not defined. That the reason name is not defined. For example, if I write like this, then that time, if you run this program, if you run this program, see, my output is like what? 1, 2, name, 3. This is expected only. What is the difference between the previous execution and the current execution? In the previous execution, if you observe, first two statements got executed, and my third statement, okay, raises some exception like this name error, okay, and my fourth statement is executed or not executed. Fourth statement is executed or not executed. Fourth statement is not executed. Fourth statement is not executed. Yes or no? My fourth statement is not executed. That means my program terminated as normal or abnormal. Okay, now I can define normal termination is nothing but in your file how many statements are there. Each and every statement starting to ending, each and every statement if execute as expected. That means first statement to last statement. Every statement got executed means I can say my program terminated like normal. My program terminated like normal. In this case, tell me, it is a normal termination or abnormal termination if I run this one. If I run this one, my program can terminate like normal or abnormal. Py, one dot py. If I run this, my program will terminate like normal or abnormal. Come on, my program will terminate like normal or abnormal. If I click run,
Normal.
okay, save it, save it. I didn't save it. Now I'm saving. Now tell me, normal or abnormal?
Normal.
No, right? Why? Because 1, 2 printed name reference a value. Name is like it refers something or it is like it is itself value. Come on, name. It is a reference.
Referring
It is a reference. So name anywhere defined or not defined? Is my name defined or not defined?
Not defined.
Not defined. If it is not defined, here it gives me a name error and my fourth statement got executed or not executed? Not executed. So that my program terminated normal or abnormal? Abnormal or not. That means when I can say my program terminated like normal and abnormal means, okay, starting to ending each and every statement got executed. Starting to ending, if the each and every statement got executed, that kind of termination I can say like a normal termination. In this case, this is what? In this case, okay, this is what? Normal or abnormal? First statement, second one, third one also value, fourth one also normal number. So these statements got executed, right? As like a normal or abnormal.
normal.
It's like a normal termination or not. The same statements if I write like this. The same statements if I write it like this. Okay, if I remove this one, if I remove this one. Now it is like a normal or abnormal termination. Now it is like normal or abnormal termination.
Abnormal.
Okay, it's like an abnormal way because first two statements got executed. After that, what happened? After that, it is looking for the name, but name is not there. Okay, after that, three. So that this is which kind of termination? Normal or abnormal? It is like a abnormal termination or not? It's like a abnormal termination. Yes or no? When I can say my program terminated normal means starting to ending, each and every statement got executed without any interruption. Then you can say it's like a normal termination. Okay, due to some reason, if all the statements not executed, if my last statement, okay, at least you can say like a, okay, till last statement, if not executed due to some interruptions, then the termination we can say like what? Abnormal termination or not. Understood terminology wise? Okay, na? Okay, then. What is syntax error? What is runtime error? Okay, na? Okay, this is like a abnormal termination, right? In Python, if you want to comment the lines, hash, okay, it is which termination? Abnormal or not? Abnormal termination. Abnormal termination. Now, this one, what we can say? If I write the name like this, what you can say? It is like abnormal or normal? It is like normal termination, right? So if I write for the syntax error, can anyone tell me? Yes. Now, what is the output if I run this program? If I run this program, what is the output? If I run this program, what is the output? If I run this program, what is the output? If I run this program, what is the output?
Syntax error, print of names.
It is going to print syntax error, or it is going to give like 1, 2, and then some error.
1, 2, and then error.
1, 2, it is going to print the. Okay, no problem. We can check it. Can I run it? Py 3.py. Now what happened? See, any program, any language, you can take it. Okay. First, it is going to check for the syntax error. If everything is okay, then only it is going to start the execution. Otherwise, it can't. Understood? Everything is like perfect. Okay, then only it is going to start the execution. Otherwise, it can't. First, it is going to check one statement or two statements or okay, 10 statements. It is not a matter. My compiler try to compile this particular code. Okay, whenever you compile, you found some errors or not. Compile time errors. What is that error? Okay, something is like missing, right? So here you can see like what? Okay, never closed. It is which kind of error? It is which kind of error? It is a syntax error. Whenever you get the syntax error, okay, it is not start the execution. When it is going to start the execution means whenever my syntax errors or like my syntax errors count is like 0. Whenever my syntax errors count is like 0, then only it is going to start the execution or not. Then only it is going to start the execution. Understood, everyone? Come on. Then only it's going to start the execution or not. All are okay. Whenever in your code there has one syntax error there, it means it is not start execution. For example, 10 statements are there, 8 statements there is no syntax errors. Okay, but 9th statement there has a syntax error is there. In that case, my first 8 statements not start the execution. When it is going to start the execution, my compilation and everything is completed without any syntax error. That is okay. Next step is what? Start the execution or not. Understood? So in this case, first statement no error, second statement no error, but third statement error is there. Is my first and second statements got executed or not executed? My first and second statements got executed or not executed? Come on. My first and second statements got executed or not executed? Hmm? Hmm. Not executed, right? Why? Because my third statement has a syntax error. My third statement has a syntax error. Should okay. So how we can come to know there has a syntax error there? When you can get the syntax error means if you not follow the guidelines and the rules. Okay, whenever you use print method while calling, you should have to close this one, right? This is the guideline. Okay, if you not follow the guideline, then the time you can get the syntax error or not. Whenever you get the syntax error, okay, whenever you get the syntax error, then that time it not start the execution. My syntax error count is like 0. Then only it is going to start the execution or not. Clear, everyone? Come on.
Yes, sir.
Here, my output is what? Here, my output is what? 1 to none? No. Directly syntax error. This is my output. Okay. Syntax error. When I can get the syntax error? When I can get the syntax errors? If you not follow the guidelines. If you not follow the guidelines, if you not follow the rules, then you can get the syntax errors. Then you can get the syntax errors. Understood? Okay. Okay, then the next one is like what? The next one is like what? The next one is like a runtime error. The next one is like what? Runtime error. Now, 10 by 0, for example. 10 by 0. Okay. Now, if you run this one, what is my output? First, syntactically it is valid or invalid. Syntactically valid or invalid. Fourth one. Syntactically valid or invalid.
Valid.
Yeah.
100% value. Print open closing some value. Print open closing. Print some value open closing. 100% value. So if it is like 100% valid, okay, my syntax errors count is like what? If you follow the rules and guidelines properly, so there is no syntax errors. So my syntax errors count is like 0. Whenever my syntax error count is like 0, it is going to start the execution or not. Now, py 4.py, if you observe, say this 1 printed and 2 printed, and then if you observe 10 by 0, okay, it is gives me an error, division by 0 error, okay, 0 division error, and my next 3 statement executed or not executed? Not executed. This is which kind of termination? Normal or abnormal? This is which kind of termination? Normal or abnormal termination? Come on. This program terminated like normal or abnormal?
Abnormal.
It's like an abnormal or not? Do we have any syntax errors or not? Do we have any syntax errors?
No.
No. How we can say no syntax errors? Well, because some of the parts, if you observe here, some part got executed or not? Some part got executed or not? One, no, two. These two statements got executed, right? These two statements got executed. If you have a syntax error, okay, my execution is not start. Okay, there is no syntax errors, nothing. Whenever if it is not having the syntax error, then it is going to start what? Actual execution or not. If it is start actual execution, print one, one, print two, two. The next one is like print 10 by 0. Print 10 by 0. Come on, print 10 by 0. Okay, it is like not a valid value. That's the reason what happened. It is throwing, okay, an error or not. When it is throws an error, when it is throws an error, at compile time or at run time, at the time of execution or at the time of compilation. When it throws an error,
Execution.
at the time of execution or not. Whenever, okay, an error throw at the time of execution or whenever a error throw at runtime, running the program, that errors we can say like terminology wise exceptions. Okay, now syntax error, the next one is like runtime error. Runtime error is nothing but what? While executing the program, while executing the program, if you get any error, that error I can say like what? Runtime error or not. While executing the program, not at the time of compilation, while running the program, while executing the program, if you get any error, that errors I can say like what? Runtime errors. Understood? Now you can define what is exception. What is exception in Python? What is exception? Terminology wise, what is exception? Simply, I can say a runtime error. A runtime error, I can say like a exception. At the time of execution, if you get an error, that error, I can say terminology wise, a exception. A runtime error, I can say like a exception. Whenever you get a runtime error, okay, now onwards, I don't want to use the terminology like runtime error. I want to use like an exception. Whenever you use whenever an exception raised in your program, my program like terminated as normal or abnormal. Whenever my program, in my program, one exception raised, or that means one runtime error, okay, raised. If you get a runtime error, that time my program will get like normal termination as like abnormal termination whenever you get the runtime error. Whenever you get the runtime error, my program is terminated like abnormal or not. It's not like a normal. Okay, terminology wise, 4 terminologies we discussed. One is like normal termination. One is like normal termination. Another one is like abnormal termination. The next one is like syntax error. The next one is like runtime error. The next one is like exception or not. What is normal termination? My program execute from first statement to last statement. Each and every statement got executed without any interruptions. That termination I can say like a normal. Due to some reason, if my program is not executed end to end, starting to ending, if it not executed due to some reasons, okay, that kind of termination I can say abnormal termination. Whenever you run the program, okay, if you not follow the rules and guidelines, okay, then you can get an error like a syntax error. Whenever you get the syntax error, it means it's not started the execution. It is looking for your coding standards, if you followed the rules or not. Okay, it is going to check. If you not follow the rules, it is not started the execution, just it is like what? Okay, it is not started the execution, just it is like what? Just it is like, okay, throws a syntax error. Okay, it is not showing, or it is not start execution any one of the statement. Till there is out of 10 statements, one statement only having syntax errors, it is okay, fine. Okay, it is not start remaining 9 statements, just it is going to, okay, throw syntax error and requires like what? Fix for that. Whenever my syntax errors count is like 0, then only it's going to start your execution. Then only it's going to start your actual execution or not. Okay, when you can get the syntax errors, if you not follow the rules or guidelines, syntactical rules, if you not follow, then you can get the syntax errors or not. Yes or no? Okay, it is a kind of not normal or abnormal termination. It's not start the execution. It's not start the execution. Understood? Everyone is okay? It not start the execution. Okay, everyone? Okay, then what is runtime error? What is runtime error? There is no syntax errors, nothing. Now my program start execution. At the time of execution, if you get some errors, at the time of execution, if you get some errors, those errors I can say like a runtime errors or not. At the time of execution, if you get some errors, those errors I can say like what? Runtime errors or not. Understood or not? At the time of execution, at the time of running the program, if you get any error, those errors I can say like a runtime errors or not. Now you can define an exception. What is an exception? What is It's simply, I can say, a runtime error. While executing the program, if you get any error, that error I can say like what? A runtime error. That runtime error, terminology wise, now onwards I can spell like an exception or not. So simply I can say, what is an exception? My exception is like a runtime error. That's it. My exception is like a runtime error. That's it. Got my point? Okay. Now, once you get the runtime error, my program will terminate like normal or abnormal? Abnormal. If it is like an abnormal terminated, if you leave like this only, tell me, if you leave like this only, exception raised at line number what? 1, no. 2, no. Line number 3, my exception raised. In which line? Exception raised line number 3. Line number 3. Okay, get the runtime error. Runtime error. Runtime error I can say like what? Exception. Runtime error I can say like a exception or not. Runtime error I can say like an exception. Okay, tell me, this particular line throws an error at runtime. Now fourth statement will execute or not execute? Fourth statement will execute or not execute? Fourth statement will execute or not execute? Tell me.
Not
Fourth,
execute.
fourth statement will not execute, right? Fourth statement will not execute. So in the entire life, if I run these four statements any number of times, in the entire life, my third or fourth statement will never execute or not. Why? Because first two statements got executed, third statement always raise an exception, right? Always rise, okay, always throws a runtime error. Runtime error I can say like an exception. So how many times you run this program, always at line number 3 throws a runtime error is nothing but an exception. Line number 4 will never execute or not. If you leave like this only, what is the use of writing this statement? What is the use if it is not execute? Yes or no? Yes or no? What is the use of this one if you not, okay, if you not handle properly, what is the use of writing this particular fourth line if it is not executed? Why I need to write? Now only one statement is there after this one. For example, there has 100 statements are there, those 100 statements also will not execute, right? So what is the use of writing those 100 statements? That the reason, whenever the exception raised, you should not leave the program as like a abnormal termination. You should have to provide some solution. There has some problem is there in this particular statement. Because of that problem only, it raises an exception. Because of that exception only, remaining statements not executed. Remaining statements still not having any error, those are like a clean statements. But because of this statement, those statements not executed or not. If you leave like this only, these statements will never execute in their entire life. That's the reason what you have to do. Okay, due to some reason my program got interrupted, that's okay, fine. If you leave like this, there is no use writing the statements like 3 4 like that. You should have to handle that particular, how this is interrupted, right? You should have to handle that exception properly or not. You should have to handle that exception properly or not. Yes or no? Understood or not? You should have to handle that runtime error properly or not. So how we can handle? If you handle that runtime error properly, then your program should terminate like normal. Then only I can say like yes, you handle that issue properly. If you handle still this statement not executed, means what is the use of that one? What is the use of that one? That the reason my exception raised at line number 3. If you leave like this statement will never execute. It's like an abnormal termination. But my requirement is what? You have to handle this exception properly. You have to handle this exception properly, and you have to provide some graceful termination. Graceful termination is nothing but normal termination. You should have to make these statements execution, right? You should have to execute these statements or not. You should not live like that. Then how we can? Come on, how we can? Then what you want me to do? Exception raised. Exception raised, that is clear. Okay, why? Because my program terminated as abnormal. Exception raised. After this one, how many statements are there? Those statements also not executed. Those statements also not executed. Come on. Exception raised. After this exception, how many statements are there? Those statements not executed. So that I can say the termination is like what? Abnormal termination. You should not leave like this. Then what you have to do? In which statement the exception raised, can you handle that exception, and can you provide a graceful termination to your program? That is your responsibility as a developer or not. Whenever the exception rises, that's okay, fine. While executing the program, you may get some runtime errors. Is nothing but exceptions. That is expected only. You should not leave like that. You have to handle that exceptions properly, and you have to provide a graceful termination to your program or not. That is the responsibility of your, okay, as a developer or not. So that the exception raised at line number 3, I need, okay, as a developer, I need to handle what? I need to handle this particular exception or not. Need to handle this exception. Need to handle this exception or not. Exception is nothing but runtime error. Runtime error. I need to handle that exception and provide what? Some graceful termination or not. Provide some normal or abnormal termination. Normal termination or graceful termination or not. Provide some graceful termination. Understood? Up to here, okay? Now what is exception handling? What is exception handling? Our concept is like an exception handling, right? Whenever, okay, executing the program, if you get any error, we can say like a runtime error. Runtime error, terminology wise, we can say like an exceptions. Whenever exception raised, my program got terminated abnormally, okay, it is not just execute the remaining statements. As a developer, I have to provide some graceful termination to my program by handling those exceptions or not. Yes or no? Provide a graceful termination to your program. Whatever you get the errors at runtime, whatever the exception raised, you have to handle those exceptions and provide some graceful termination to your program. For that purpose, you should have to learn exception handling concept as a developer. You need to handle those exceptions. That's it. Understood? Terminology was okay. Normal termination, abnormal termination. Next, syntax error, runtime error, and exception handling. Okay or not? Exception handling. Okay, now up to here. Any questions? Okay, okay then. So due to some other calls, I didn't join, right? So for, okay, 6:30 like that. So tomorrow onwards, I'm available. Okay, you can join like as usual. Okay, 6:30 and 6:40 in between. Okay, morning. So for I joined like 7 o'clock, right? So tomorrow onwards, you can join like 6:40, 6:30, 6:40 in between. Okay. Can you join? Are you able to join?
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, then remaining things we'll see in next session. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining.